What you've come to know as NGP, our next generation portable, is officially named PlayStation Vita.
When the PlayStation Vita was originally unveiled to the world under the working title of Next Generation Portable back in 2011, Sony promised to provide gamers with a system whose power was unparalleled in the history of portable gaming. While the PSP did produce two fantastic, fully open-world Grand Theft Auto games, both titles looked and played like something out of the sixth console generation. Outside of Rockstar's efforts, however, the vast majority of open-world games on handhelds were mere shadows of their console counterparts. But the Vita, proudly boasting the tagline console quality on the go, promised to shake up the status quo. With hardware specs that utterly eclipsed the competition, the Vita stood posed to finally deliver the full open-world experience on the go. So, roughly 7 years later, did the Vita ultimately deliver on the open-world front? To definitively answer that question, let's take a look at some of the best open-world games to ever release on the PlayStation Vita. Swinging in at the 10th spot on our list is 2013's The Amazing Spiderman. Released almost a year after its original launch on other systems to coincide with the then upcoming follow-up to Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man film reboot, Gameloft's The Amazing Spider-Man serves as an epilogue to that original film. Unfortunately, the story, which follows Peter as he attempts to save New York from an outbreak and the delusional new director of Oscorp, lacks any moments of real impact, and ends up solidifying as one of Spidey's less memorable outings. Of course, the main draw of any great Spider-Man game is the open-world web-slinging mechanics, something this incarnation brought back in full force. While the Amazing Spider-Man spin on New York isn't the prettiest or most interesting sandbox to play around in, there's something inherently fun about swinging around the city at fast speeds, occasionally opting to chase getaway cars or participate in cop-criminal standoffs. The game's combat is a simplified take on the Batman Arkham formula, essentially button mashing to take down enemies before finishing them off with a web finisher, and it's ultimately serviceable, if a bit bland. With a large sandbox to swing around in and tons of comic pages to collect, The Amazing Spider-Man is a perfectly fine Spidey game, if never daring to be anything greater than that. The Vita version suffers from a choppy framerate and what can best be described as muddy visuals, but those willing to brave these issues for the full Spider-Man experience on the go will find it here. Next up, we have Retro City Rampage. A homage to the 8-bit video games of old and a parody of 80s and 90s culture, Rampage effectively turns you loose to wreak havoc in the city of Thefteropolis. While there's a cute story here, the main draw of Retro City Rampage lies in its addictive gameplay, the bulk of which is experienced from a top-down perspective. While in free roam, you're free to explore the city, which even includes a few arcade games to play. Throw in a neat art style with vibrant visuals that pop on the Vita's OLED screen, and you have a great game that manages to feel like a proper throwback without feeling dated. Don't let the fact that it's an indie game fool you. Retro City Rampage boasts a massive city to explore, full of fun references and nods to all things pop culture, from Ghostbusters to the Ninja Turtles. It's some of the most fun you can have on your Vita, and I can't recommend it enough. While Naughty Dog has since moved on to more cinematic ventures with Uncharted and The Last of Us, their Jak trilogy for the PS2 remains some of PlayStation's greatest platformers. While the first title in the collection, the Precursor Legacy, is more of a linear story-driven experience, it's the second and third game in the series that really opened up the game world for the player. Jak 2 introduces Haven City, effectively a sandbox full of vehicles to hijack and citizens to terrorize, GTA style, though this will build up Jak's notoriety in a system not dissimilar to the one seen in the Assassin's Creed series. There are other locations to visit as well, and a few extra missions to partake in outside of the main story. Jak 3 only further expands the game world, with Jak now having access to 2 major cities and an entire wasteland to explore, filled with collectibles to track down and more side quests to encourage exploration. As fantastic as the Jak trilogy is, it's held back from a higher spot on our list due to the excessive performance issues that plague these titles. While Jak 2 suffers the least, all 3 games run at a poor framerate on Vita, and graphically look slightly worse than their PS2 counterparts. Not exactly console quality on the go. Loose controls can also cause frustration in platformers that often call for precise movements. Those who are willing to look past these problems will find 3 exceptional games here, 2 of which pack fun worlds to explore, but that doesn't change the fact that the Vita port of these classic titles is the worst way to experience these games. Set in the aftermath of the French and Indian War and leading into the American Revolution, Assassin's Creed III Liberation allows gamers to experience a turbulent chapter in American history through the eyes of Aveline de Grandpré, an African-French assassin and the series' first female protagonist. While the player begins in the sprawling town of New Orleans, the game world slowly begins to expand over the course of the story, eventually granting Aveline access to the Louisiana Bayou and Chichen Itza, as well as a brief detour to the American frontier. With a score of collectibles to find, different outfits and weapons to purchase, and a trade minigame to partake in, Liberation's game world is fun to explore, though it can admittedly feel bare bones compared to other installments in the series. Liberation lacks the hunting mechanics of its console counterpart, and outside of the main campaign, there's not much to do in the way of side quests or otherwise. That said, there's enough content here to keep completionists satisfied for upwards of 15 hours. What Liberation lacks in a gripping narrative, it makes up for in providing more or less the full AC experience on the go, with gameplay that manages to capture the same feel seen in the mainline series. While not ranking among the best games in the franchise, Liberation outshines any prior attempts to bring the series to a handheld device, and remains one of Vita's best open-world games. Square Enix's long-running Dragon Quest series has produced some of the most iconic games in the RPG genre, dating back to Dragon Warrior for the NES. It was a surprise then when Dragon Quest Builders was announced, a sandbox RPG with obvious parallels to Minecraft, a fact that led many to unfairly disregard it as simply another clone of Mojang's Phenomenon. Builders follows an unnamed protagonist as he strives to rebuild the world of Alefgard effectively from scratch, in the aftermath of an alternate ending from the original Dragon Quest. To do so, the player must continually gather and build in an effort to create a town and effectively kickstart a new civilization. While the game's blocky aesthetic and in-depth crafting system may draw parallels to Minecraft, it differs mainly in its RPG elements. The game world is peppered with NPCs to interact with and protect, who in turn will give the player simple quests to embark upon. While the game's story, combat, and crafting systems are relatively simplistic by modern RPG standards, there's something inherently charming about Dragon Quest Builders' game world. From the cartoonish spins on classic Dragon Quest foes, to the comedic dialogue that's sprinkled with references, Builders has a distinct personality that helps it stand out amongst other similar crafting RPGs. While it's the die-hard Dragon Quest fans that will undoubtedly get the most out of Builders, this is really an experience anyone can enjoy, boasting a varied and vibrant game world to traverse and develop. What is there to say about Minecraft that hasn't already been said? It's one of the most popular games of all time, and for good reason. Very few games in history have managed to cultivate creativity from its players as much as Mojang's classic sandbox, and prior to the release of the Nintendo Switch Edition, the Vita version stood as the best way to experience Minecraft on the go. After years of putting up with the severely gimped Pocket Edition of the game, fans finally got the chance to have the full Minecraft experience on a handheld with the PlayStation Vita Edition. While the draw distance was slightly reduced and the player cap in multiplayer lowered from 8 possible players to a maximum of 4, the Vita Edition stands as otherwise roughly on par with the PS3 edition of the game, allowing for saved worlds to be transferred between the two versions. It's the kind of game every console should have in its library, and its multiplayer mode is easily some of the most fun you can have on the Vita with friends. Easily the best racing game on the system, Need for Speed Most Wanted allows the player to explore Fairhaven City as they slowly climb the ranks of the town's most wanted racers. Outside of some rubber banding issues, the racing mechanics feel great, and while the graphics have taken a hit in the transition to Vita, the game manages to run at a steady frame rate throughout. Most Wanted packs over 60 cars to unlock, with new rides being unlocked by discovering jack spots placed throughout the city. When you're not running from cops throughout the game's sandbox, you'll be setting records smashing through billboards or racing past the game's many speed cameras, all of which you can even do with friends in the game's multiplayer mode. Arguably one of Vita's best games, Most Wanted is everything you could possibly want from an open-world racing game on the go. While on the surface, Terraria may just seem like 2D Minecraft, in reality it's much more than that. Once you've customized your sprite, you're let loose into a procedurally generated world with 3 main objectives: to explore, build, and battle. Better yet, this can all be done in 8-player online co-op. The integration of genuinely useful touch controls in navigating inventory and crafting menus, when combined with the Vita's portability and beautiful OLED display, make this, in many ways, the definitive way to experience Terraria. The drive to continue exploring in hopes of finding new loot is at the heart of Terraria, but the game's mechanics go far deeper than that. You can collect resources, delve into the game's surprisingly deep crafting system, build a village, and watch NPCs slowly arrive to populate it. Combine all this with a huge game world, and you have an all-around fantastic open-world experience in the palm of your hands. Our runner-up for Best Open-World Vita Game is also one of the system's most iconic games, Gravity Rush. While it's since been brought over to the PS4 in the form of a 2015 remaster, there was a time when Gravity Rush was one of Vita's most prominent exclusives, boasting unique art style, intriguing narrative, novel gameplay mechanics, and Hexville, an entire city to explore. The city is broken up into 4 different districts, each of which has its own unique look and sound. The way the different parts of the city each have their own distinguishing traits and personality always reminded me a bit of Bioshock's Rapture. Cat's ability to fly around the city in 0G serves as a novel new way to traverse a game world, and Hexville is packed with challenges and a handful of side missions to occupy you after finishing the lengthy main story. There are also 3 DLCs, each of which introduces 2 new side quests and challenge missions. While it may be a bit light on side activities to partake in, Gravity Rush is still one of Vita's absolute best games, with a memorable game world that's fun to play around in. Before we get to our top spot, I'd like to give out a few honorable mentions to games that didn't quite make the cut. First off is Oddworld Stranger's Wrath HD, a 2011 remaster of an Xbox classic. As you progress through Stranger's Wrath, new towns are made accessible to you, filled with new bounties to take on as Stranger the Bounty Hunter. Unfortunately, the fact that the game periodically locks off portions of the game world as you progress through the story means Stranger's Wrath isn't truly open world. That said, this is still a great port of an awesome game, and I'd highly recommend it. The next honorable mention goes out to the Dark Souls-inspired Salt and Sanctuary, a fantastic 2D RPG and one of Vita's best games of 2017. The main factor keeping Salt and Sanctuary off the list is the fact that it's more of a Metroidvania than a proper open-world game. While you have the option to teleport between locations and backtrack, the game is still largely linear. As such, it didn't quite meet the criteria, though that shouldn't discourage you from checking it out. The same goes for Muramasa Rebirth, one of Vita's best games, though more of a Metroidvania at heart. Our last honorable mention goes out to Disney Infinity 2.0. Similar to the Skylanders series, Disney Infinity is a toys-to-life sandbox game, meaning outside accessories are actually required to play the game. Thankfully, everything you'll need to get started is included in the starter pack, which bundles in the Vita-exclusive symbiote Spider-Man figure to play as in-game. Across the Spider-Man, Avengers, and Guardians of the Galaxy playsets, those willing to put down the cash will find up to 3 game worlds to explore, swapping between iconic Marvel characters to take down foes and complete some 200+ challenges. While the Vita version suffers from an occasionally choppy framerate and mediocre visuals, it's still fun to take on side missions and level up your character as you explore this cartoon take on New York City. Which at last brings us to our final game. Arguably one of the best games of the 7th console generation, Borderlands 2 is something of a perfect sequel, doubling down on the humor and loot-driven gameplay of its predecessor. When it was announced for Vita back in 2014, many wondered how developer Iron Galaxy would manage to bring a game known in part for its obscene sheer amount of content to a portable system. Alas, here we are in 2018, with nearly the entire Borderlands 2 experience on the go. While much has already been said of the Vita version's inferior visuals and less than stellar framerate, the fact that the game runs as well as it does is, quite frankly, a testament to Iron Galaxy's prowess as a developer. Boasting 6 DLC packs and PS3 cross-save functionality, Borderlands 2 on Vita will occupy you for dozens, if not hundreds of hours. With scores of side quests and challenges to complete, locations to discover, and unique guns to collect, Borderlands 2 is the quintessential open-world experience on Vita, and it's one of the system's most impressive technical feats, period. And there you have it, the 10 best open-world games on Vita, according to me anyway. Which brings us back to the question posed at the top of this video. Did the Vita ultimately deliver on the open world front? While we may have never gotten the Grand Theft Auto Vita game that we always wanted, the system did still see some open world entries from a few major franchises, namely in the forms of Borderlands, Assassin's Creed, and Minecraft. That said, several of the titles mentioned here suffered from performance issues, a fact that goes against the system's promise of console quality on the go. Looking back some 6 years after originally getting my Vita back in 2012, I'm content with the games we got. That said, there's no denying that the Vita could have delivered more in the way of open world experiences, and it's a shame that we never got that one killer app like GTA that could have effectively saved the system. Alas, here we are at the end of the video. If you're still watching up until this point, I'd just like to thank you for tuning in. I've had a great time covering my favorite handheld here on YouTube in these last couple months, and your guys' support and enthusiasm is what drives me to keep delivering. For all things PlayStation, including a deep dive into the world of cancelled Vita games, feel free to subscribe. Until next time, this has been Fixation.